Welcome to Panel 54, Africa's Heard Differently. I'm Somoina Kimojino, holding fort while Waweru Njoroge and Okoh are on assignment. Today we talk to Charles Murito, a very good friend of mine, Google's Regional Director for Sub-Saharan Africa, Government Affairs and Public Policy, and Interim Country Director. Our conversations explore how technology, and especially artificial intelligence, is shaping Africa's future for digital transformation and innovation to policy, access and the opportunities and risk AI brings to the continent. From Lagos to Lamu, Cape Town to Cairo, this is Panel 54. Let's get into it. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Somoina. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Such a pleasure to have you. What is AI? I mean, everywhere I go nowadays, there's something with AI, technology with AI. Everyone is looking at AI as the future. What is AI?
That's a fantastic question, and I think a great point for us to start the conversation, because a lot of people are talking about what artificial intelligence is, but at the core of it, it's really just a part of the broad field of computer science, which really looks at how do we drive better learning for machines as well as software to be able to perform human tasks. And there are many sections of artificial intelligence, right? So artificial intelligence is really about how does technology do tasks that can be similar to what human beings can do. And there are different sections of it, right? A lot of the things that we're actually now dealing with is around general AI. Right. But the next level which we want to get to is what we call agentic AI. And in essence, with agentic AI is where AI can be able to perform tasks for you before you even prompt it to. Right. And that's really a great place. And then sort of the holy grail of it is the AI superintelligence. Right. And that's where it actually is greater than human intelligence itself. So that's what AI and the field of AI sort of in a nutshell is.
So obviously with that comes risks. So what are some of the risks around AI?
There's plenty of risks. And the way I think about artificial intelligence, just as with any with any technology, and perhaps there's one other thing that I should mention around AI in the context of technology. Right? AI, in essence, is what we call a general purpose technology, right? So, in essence, it's going to transform every single sector of our economy and our society. Think about it in the same sense as electricity. So, when we got electricity, it transforms the way we cook, right? It provided refrigeration. It provides lights, for instance. In essence, electricity is even the foundation of any technology that we're able to do, right? And so in a similar vein, with AI, it's going to transform every single sector of society. And you can think about the opportunities before I talk about the risks. When it comes to healthcare, AI is going to really transform healthcare in a way that helps people be able to access health in a manner that they were not able to do before. And I want to give one or two examples on that. One is in Africa, for instance, you have the lowest ratio of specialists to patients. With artificial intelligence, you can be able to use AI from afar to be able to detect and diagnose illnesses and also for people to deliver more telehealth than you were able to do before.
Sure,
that's one sector, right? That's health. Let's go to education. You're able to provide personalized education and training for different students. And so for this particular one, I want to give an example of, for instance, a classroom where people are doing insha or a composition and they have homework to do. With a Learn LM, you can be able to then use that AI technology to grade all the students in that classroom. The students will then get feedback that shows them what areas of composition or insha are they strong at. And you can think about context, for instance, or grammar or structure, right? And then a teacher can be able to see in aggregate how the students did, but also what areas does the class in general actually not do well and where are they really strong. And then you can go sort of zoom out a little bit further to now the Ministry of Education.
I was actually going to go there in terms of education.
Exactly.
Like, are we in a space where we're able to, yes, the use of AI, versus are we able to teach with AI?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the example that I like to give, because now at a ministerial level, you can be able to use LearnLM to look at how is different regions of the country performing on different parts of that same insha. Is it the grammar, right? Is Northeastern doing really well with grammar or with structure or actual composition? Or are certain areas of the country not doing as well in grammar or structure or context, etc.? And then you can be able to deploy the resources required to strengthen that part where they're not doing well, right? So for me, education is another one. And then the last one that I want to give an example is on on agriculture, right? And I can really go through literally financial services or different parts of the economy. But when it comes to agriculture, you can be able to use, for instance, an AI-enabled mobile phone and camera to take a photo of a plant like this one that may have a certain yellowing and understand what is the problem with that and what are the cures. What do you need to do, right? So from an agri-health, agri-tech perspective, you're able to then drive better food security, right? Better yields. And those are just 3 examples of education, health, and agriculture where AI is genuinely transforming the way we live.
Which is interesting for Africa because there's always, healthcare, agri, education, key.
Yes.
But let me throw it back to, because you're with big tech.
Yes.
Are we reaching a space where in Africa we're able to sort of move from big tech creating to us localizing it for the market, the Africa region? So agri space, the education space, healthcare space, how we're able to move from where we have those developing it and finding funding to be able to scale it up to the next level?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I think, one, my company at Google, we're doing a lot of work around that. And I want to give an example from Ghana, whereby we've been working closely with the Ministry of Education to deliver and pilot LearnLM, which is being done by a local Ghanaian organization, right? They're taking that, which is on the back end, we have LearnLM, and then they take it and apply open source to build on top of that layer. So think about Android, right? The Android ecosystem, which is the best OS out there.
We'll let you have that.
When you think about Android, there's a lot of developers who've built apps on top of the Android ecosystem. So AI is exactly the same, right? Whereby companies like Google are going to build the large language models. And on top of the large language models, you're able to develop use cases on top of that, which now can be able to be localized. And this is what this organization in Ghana is doing with LearnLM and deploying it across right now 13 different high schools where they're piloting this and working very closely with teachers to see how do they help drive better personalized education to the students in the Ghanaian educational system.
That's good. And with that comes that big question of, with AI, how do you protect yourself?
Yeah. How do you protect the risks that sort of come with
it comes
that?
with it, yeah.
And there's a couple of things around that. Number one is working very closely with policymakers, right? We cannot be able to develop technology and utilize it without really being responsible. And the way I think about AI is that AI is like a knife in your kitchen. You can use it for good and it can also be used for ill, right?
Sure.
But the true nature of it is that there are more people using this technology to do good than ill. However, I think that more often than not, we spend and perhaps sensationalize the bad sides of technology or the bad news. I guess it's that old adage of bad news travel faster
Yes.
than good news, right? But there's still there's still risks. We at Google have been doing a couple of things. We have what we call the AI golden standards, as well as the AI principles. And the core of this is really ensuring that we test and test and test to make sure that we are lowering the risk of our tools to be used for bad. And that is something that we'll continue to do that because it's this balance between being bold and also responsible.
Yes.
And working closely with policymakers, we want to ensure that we can be able to drive those two and have the right balance, because there's something that we've spoken about a lot, which is there is the misinformation, but also there's the missed opportunity.
Yes.
Right? So we do not want Africans to miss the opportunity that AI can deliver for economies across the board.
Okay, so African countries getting on board in terms of policy and I guess maybe AU in general, bringing together the policy.
That's a great question, Somo. I am working very closely with policymakers across the continent. A few already have come up with their AI strategies. So I'll give you an example. Nigeria last year in 2024 published the Nigeria AI strategy, national AI strategy, which is a really forward-thinking policy paper. It's not law, but at least it builds the framework of what it needs to be. Rwanda has also worked very closely both with industry as well as with policymakers to develop the Rwanda AI roadmap. At the Africa Union level, and working also closely with NEPAD, they're developing the Africa AI strategy, which is part of the Africa Union 2063 ambitions. And then South Africa right now has the South Africa AI Institute, whereby they're working on their plans. In Kenya, we're actually slightly ahead, whereby just earlier this year, a law was passed, a cybersecurity as well as a data protection, a data and cloud policy was passed. And this has in it a lot of the references of really forward-looking policies around the use cases and the way that the frameworks and guardrails for AI. So African countries are actually right there at the forefront. And I think that the beauty of AI and AI policy right now is that we don't have to fall behind, right? Everyone around the world is at the same space.
I agree.
Discovering the opportunity that AI has to bring. And so as society, in terms of general society, policymakers, right, academia and civil society, we can all collaborate together to ensure that Africa is at the forefront of this.
I guess when you talk about that, we also then need to consider infrastructure.
Yes.
Because we've seen sometimes AI developers move faster than first policymakers, first of all. We've seen it in the Gen Z era. People create, I think sometimes there's misinformation on what AI really is.
Yes.
That's why it's so important. What is AI? Because it's really creating a center for data for how do you consume it and what do you put in out and how do you reach it faster?
Yes.
Really. So infrastructure, where are we with infrastructure in sort of Africa?
Yes. So perhaps I can frame it in three ways, right? And I'll touch on each one of them. The first one is around connectivity. If we want to be able to drive good AI and take the benefits of AI, you need great connectivity. Right? So that's number one. We at Google have been investing heavily on the continent around that. And I'll give you a couple of examples. In 2021, we announced that we're going to invest $1 billion over a 5-year period to build a couple of cables, cloud region. And these are things which are fundamental to be able to get AI moving forward because you need that compute power. I'm proud to say that we actually surpassed that $1 billion commitment. And just yesterday, we recommitted to do 4 connectivity hubs across Africa.
Oh, wow.
On the south, north, east, and west. And these connectivity hubs are basically going to enable the landing of the Equiano cables as well as Umoja, which is underway, to then drive better connectivity, right?
Is the East African one in Kenya? Or?
I cannot say that now.
Just checking.
Let's have another episode and I'll be able to announce that then.
Okay.
But good one. I love that. So those connectivity hubs are really going to bring the international internet capacity closer to home, right?
Okay.
That's number one. And that's really important. So again, the second piece of that is the cloud regions and data centers, right? Because to be able to get the most benefit of artificial intelligence and AI, you need to have compute power. So we launched a cloud region in South Africa, and this is one that can be able to really help drive that compute power that people need to process the large data sets. And that's really important. And then the third thing, which always holds more people behind, are quality devices.
Yes.
We need to have more Africans having better quality devices in their hands. And that then really improves the experience that they can have. So that's around the infrastructure piece. But I want to really touch on skilling, right? Because you can have the best infrastructure, but if you do not have a society and individuals who know how to take advantage of that technology, you cannot be able to drive that forward. So on skilling, you need to do a couple of things. One is for those students and individuals, have the right data prices, which enables them to learn either in a structured format or in a self-learning format that is snack size, right? So that's an important one. The second piece around skilling is at the curriculum level, we need to work very closely with policymakers to ensure that both STEM and computer science are subjects which are encouraged at school, both for boys and girls. Right?
And from a young age.
And from a young age, 100%, right?
Young age,
and not at tertiary level, because you're right. If you do it just at the high school or university or tertiary level, it's like trying to fix a house which has a weak foundation. So you need to really build the house with a strong foundation. And that's where STEM needs to be embedded literally at the early childhood education level, right? So pre-primary, across CBC, across IGCSE, across all curriculums that are being taught on the continent. So that's on one part. But the other part is we as private sector have a responsibility to also enable those who are less fortunate. And that's where I am proud to say that yesterday again, Google announced that for 8 countries across the continent, we're going to have free Gemini for university students for 12 months, right? And that really enables students to test, right? Things that are like Nano Banana or Veo and Imagine, right? Go do deep research on Gemini. And it's a really critical piece, because if we don't give people the opportunity for to learn, then they'll be left behind.
Yes.
I love us saying that talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not, right? So we need to give our young people on the continent opportunities to be able to take advantage and utilize the talent that they have. So those are the two things, on infrastructure as well as education.
So with that in the school system, well, in the 8 countries, so are you creating hubs? Are they school hubs, or how do we empower? Because yes, technology then is needed in those schools. Again, connectivity is needed. So it's sort of, you need a lot of partners in that whole ecosystem.
Yes, that requires a lot of collaboration. And look, Google cannot do it alone, right? But we've done our part. For instance, we have Google developer communities across university. We have something called Google developer groups and student ambassadors. And what they do is really encourage, advocate, and are ambassadors within the school system, university systems to drive technology and get more people to be more comfortable with technology. But a critical component is what I had mentioned around curriculum. We must embed STEM into the curriculum. And again, both for boys and girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the last maybe year or 2 years, what's been your favorite AI app? They may be in different sort of sectors, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, agri. What has sort of blown your mind and said, wow?
Wow. Okay, I'll start on a couple, right? I think, let me start from sort of a high level. The first one is how AI has been infused into our day-to-day lives.
Wow.
Of technology. And I just want to give some examples before I go specifically into an AI app. Emails, right? Let's take Gmail, for instance. Over the last few months, you may have seen when you open up a Gmail, it has a summary at the top, right? That's AI at its best, right? So, yes, you'll still have to read, but this gives you a quick snapshot of what is this email about and do I need to do something about it, right? So that's number one. Number two, photos. Right? The one thing I do literally every single moment, you can call me an addict for this, is I go into my Google Photos app and I just see memories coming up. And this is infused with AI, but it also matches different faces, different stories, different elements, and it's a reminder of memories that I hold and cherish, right? Because you know
I've
this.
Experienced.
I love taking
it's great
photos.
To receive that
and so for me, I love reliving those moments, right? And that's special for me. And then the last bit in terms of just day-to-day practicalities is maps. The ability to find shorter ways and more faster ways to get around Nairobi.
That's so true.
Right? And that really makes me excited.
I use that getting here today.
And that's all AI, right? So I wanted to give those three examples just to sort of make it more sort of the touch points, because sometimes we talk about AI as this big thing, but it's actually right in our faces on a day-to-day basis without us even thinking that it's AI, right? So I wanted to give that example. But from a more AI-driven apps, for me, there are two. One is Gemini. Gemini, I was talking to Tim, one of the producers here, and I was saying, Gemini buys me time.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Yeah. It enables me a task that I would have taken 3, 4, 5 hours to do. I'll be able to do it in 30 to 45 minutes.
Sure.
Right? And I am constrained by time. Right?
We all
and
are.
I think we all are. And that's something that it now makes life easier. So that's number one, Gemini. And then obviously within Gemini, I love playing nowadays with Nano Banana, which is an image and video creator, VO, and I really have a lot of fun with that. And I was playing with my son on that specifically. So that's number one. Number two is perhaps an app that most people have not heard about, but genuinely changes the way I work. It's called Notebook LM.
I have heard of it.
Notebook LM is for me one of it was a game changer.
Yeah, so explain it for the general
so
who may not know
for
really.
The listeners, Notebook LM is basically again another Google app that you can upload all manner of documents and it synthesizes those documents for you. And you can then ask questions, and you can do that either in, and not just documents, any source, right? Whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's a 100-page PDF document, right? For someone like me, when I'm preparing for board meetings and I have to go through board packs, I can be able to review that quickly. Then you can query about the content of that. You can summarize. And then going back to the element of time, you can now create a podcast which
Around
you can
it.
listen to while you're driving, right? Or when you're
Around the content
walking.
that's uploaded.
Around the content that you've uploaded.
Which is really
and
good.
for that podcast, there's an even better element whereby you can call in and ask questions in the podcast, right?
Okay.
So it's such an amazing tool. I know I get giddy talking about this, but for me, when I think about technology is not about technology in itself. It's really about how does it improve your day-to-day
How it
life
changes your life. Yeah.
and makes it easier and more accessible and just enables you to do other things, right? And I always like to use this example and say, technology is like air. Have you been thinking about breathing today?
Yeah.
No. Right?
You just pray that you are.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so technology at its best, you don't even need to think about it. It needs to be seamless, right? And when you actually think about it is when it's not working, right? And that for me is technology at its best.
Wow, that's interesting. There are many of sort of in the healthcare system, mental health is somewhere that's been sort of passionate. So
Yes.
Those who are creating AI around even just mental health.
Yeah.
Great to see that you can reach larger people with a lot that's happening in the world. Mental health is a key space.
Yes.
You don't need to go into a hospital to reach a doctor,
Yes.
psychologist. You're able to go online.
Yes.
Yeah. So transforming lives, really.
It's transforming lives. And you bring up a point that's really critical that not enough of us are talking about. It's not well discussed. I know more and more people are discussing it, but the issue of mental health is one that's a real challenge. And the bigger challenge that we have on the continent is that right now we have a ratio of 3 specialists to every 100,000
Yes.
patients, right? And that then becomes really challenging. And what technology and AI can be able to do is really look at how are your patterns, right? If you have a monitor, like for instance, I have this Whoop, which is a health monitor. With this, I'm able to track how I'm sleeping, etc. Right? Did I rest well? Did I recover well? When I work out, how does that help my recovery?
Yes.
Right? It even tells me, based on my age, is my body age the same age as my actual years, right? Because the reality of us, of many of us, is that
you're healthy.
physically you're either older or younger, depending on if you're healthier or not healthier than your actual age, right? And the point I wanted to bring around mental health is that there are now sensors that you can use powered by artificial intelligence to see the moods and be predictive about when you need help.
Yeah.
Right? And it can even be predictive about certain sort of eventual actions because they have been able to see through using great data sets of different habits and different trends. And that's the kind of thing that we really need to do, is truly adopt technology to help solve for the challenges that we have both on the continent and globally, because these are not just African problems.
There's another, as we were talking about education infrastructure, there's a fear always
Yes.
with any AI intelligence and your likes of DeepSeek and TikTok, and like it's taking over the world.
Yes.
What's your
That's my
feel?
take.
And it's like big data coming into Africa and taking all the data.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there are two things. One, that we must be pragmatic and sort of just, not focus too much on the paranoia, right? Or sensationalizing of things. It's very
we
easy
do.
to
You know
do
we
that,
do.
right? Of course, right? As human beings, it's easier, right? However, I think when you're grounded and you're pragmatic about it, you look at the opportunity. So you bring the issue of DeepSeek. Obviously, I will say, don't use DeepSeek, use Gemini,
I
It
knew,
is
of
the
course,
best.
you were going to say
Of
that.
course, I'm going to say that, right? and we have a nice track record of that, right? So use Gemini, and you can be able to get everything that you need to
Really, as they
from an
say?
AI perspective, right? I have to say that, but
But is it a fear that technology is taking over?
Yeah.
So should I fear? There's always that. Should I fear about my job?
That's
A lot of people are like, yes. What does the job market look like in the
Yes.
future?
yes.
As I say, is it Terminator taking over the world?
No, Terminator is not taking over the world. However, what I'll say this is that your job's not going to go to technology. Somebody who knows how to use your technology will take your job, right? Let's be clear about that. So as individuals, we have to have that personal responsibility to make sure that we're upskilling ourselves
constant,
and completely staying up to date, right? And if you reflect back over the last 50 years, right? And that's sort of in the mid 70s, right? Pre the mid 70s, people used to have those, what are they called? Permanent and pensionable till retirement, and you get your Rolex, right, when you retire. But that's not the case anymore. The work environment and the job space has completely changed.
Drastic.
Even over the last 15, 20 years, right? A lot of the jobs that exist today did not exist 20 years ago. So again, we have to be clear-eyed about these things and think about it more pragmatically and say it's critical for us to really look at how do you consistently upskill yourself, and how do you chase the opportunity of where the roles are. For instance, maybe 20 years ago, you did not have data analytics as a really great career. Today, data analytics is such an important part because you have all of this data that we're able, because of technology, synthesize to something that makes sense, right? And companies, for instance, let's take a company here in Kenya. Let's do a financial services company, right? So I have a son. He's 6 years old. My bank should have seen by the data that's flowing through their systems that I've started spending more time in shops that have kids into Jump Extreme where kids play, right? Wouldn't it have been great if my bank called me and said, hey, Charles, we noticed certain trends in your purchase behavior, which are different than what they were 3 to 5 years ago, right? You're spending more times in kid-friendly places. Do you have a child, right? I know there may be an issue of
I was going to say
privacy,
data protection. So there's a thin line.
Yeah, but in essence, privacy is as important as the value that it brings to you. So if this bank calls me and says, we shall give you 100,000 shillings to kickstart a savings account for your son. If you put in 20,000 shillings a month until they're 18, right? Will I be happy with that?
I would hope so.
Absolutely,
Yes.
right? Absolutely, right? Will they make money from that? Absolutely. So it's a win-win on both ends, right?
True.
So yes, we can say data is going to be taken, but the reality is data has always been existent, right? When we walked into this building, we had to record our name and ID and all of that downstairs, right? What are they using that data for, right? And the reason perhaps you and I
are they using the data? Yes.
Yeah, we'll get irritated is because it adds zero value to
How are
us.
they using it?
However, if the data is utilized in a valuable way that helps our lives become easier or adds value to our lives, we'll be like, yeah, I'll give you more data, right? And so that's the way I think about technology and the opportunity between data and the paranoia around it, right? For instance, I'll give you another example. One of the data that's collected is location data, but the ability to go somewhere and you get a ping that says, hey, by this shop, right, there's a 20% off if you go now. And it's something that you care about. For instance, you're driving and as you pass a Total or a Shell or whatever petrol station, Rubis, right, it pings you a 20% offer if you stop and fill your tank. Is that value? But that is a triangulation of your location data, right? The data to know that CRM data that you fill in at a Total or Rubis or Shell or whichever, right? but it all adds value.
That's the paranoia
Right?
guys live with. It's
I
like
know.
they're watching me,
But-
they know everything. But they are.
Yeah, right? But I
Yeah.
say, I have nothing to hide if I'm not doing anything bad.
Well, that's true.
So if it adds value to my life,
Yeah.
I'm inside. I want that.
Great.
Yeah.
And I'm in the media and event space. We've always talked about doing a podcast in here together, so this is really ironic and really great. But what do you see in that space? Where is AI going in that whole environment?
Look, you asked me earlier about what's my favorite app, AI generated app, right? Or driven app. And I think technology is fundamentally changing the way the media industry is. As you know, I was at MTV and Warner Brothers and Cartoon Network before joining Google. So media is something that I'm really passionate about. I love using Gemini to really create content in ways that I could have never done before, right? And I was actually talking about how, for instance, using location data and insights and weather, a company like Coca-Cola can create personalized ads on a day-to-day basis, depending on the weather, to say, hey, we see it's 32 degrees Celsius in Mombasa today, right? Time for a cold Fanta or a cold Tusker, right? So I think that this media space is going to be revolutionized, has already started,
It began.
right? But will truly be revolutionized over the next number of years. Think about special effects, right? How you would historically have had to build a massive set, but today
You don't.
you can be able to use AI and place people within certain spaces and really produce and quickly edit and sort of deliver content in shorter periods of time for smaller budgets.
Yeah, it's more
than
cost
you were
effective.
able to do historically. And the exciting part for me, from an Africa perspective, is that it now brings our creatives to the world for a lot less than we could have ever been able to do before, right? Africans have always had amazing stories. The challenge has been how do you
tell them?
disseminate and how do you record and really create areas of disseminating that stories. And AI is fundamentally going to be that tipping point that's going to really bring African narratives and stories to the rest of the world.
That's great. And language.
And language. The
So,
ability
yeah,
to translate.
Yes, that's
right?
it. Yes.
So you can be able, I think you may have seen this, and I know I get quite geeky about it, right? The ability to use a phone, one person speaks in one language,
And you're
the
able
other
to
person
hear-
speaks in a different language,
And that's
but they
brilliant.
understand. That is magic.
That
Some
is.
people would have called that witchcraft. But that's AI, right? And that's actually the amazing thing
I'm now
about
ready
it.
to go to Italy now.
Exactly. Now we can go to Italy because I will hear and understand everything
Absolutely.
that they're gossiping about. me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, it excites me.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Charles. It's really been a pleasure and look forward to having another Panel 54 conversation.
Somoina, this has been so much fun. We have to do this again.
I must.
Now, next time we'll talk about something else.
I agree.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All
And
right.
thanks for your time and thanks for having me.
Welcome. Well, that's it for this episode of Panel 54, where we rethink the world, one African perspective at a time. If today's conversation made you pause, reflect, or even reframe, do share it and keep the dialogue going. Don't forget to subscribe and tag us. You can find us on all your favorite platforms at Panel 54 Pod. Until next time, I'm your stand-in host, Somoina Kimojino. Stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, keep the lens clean.